Israel are at war. Hamas, a terrorist organization, led a surprise attack early this week, and Israel retaliated forcibly. Now, over 600 Israelis have been killed, and on the other side, over 300 Palestinians have been killed. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think your listeners are entitled to know that we're speaking, an hour and a half after the end of the Jewish festivals. So, for somebody like me, it takes a lot of absorbing and thinking and finding out. I mean, the first thing is my thoughts and prayers are with the people of Israel, people who are visiting Israel. Obviously, on a very personal level, my family and friends. I've still not heard from my family in the north. The horrendous, I nearly said deaths, they're not deaths, they're murders. 600 innocent people. I'm told by my security sources in Israel it's likely to be nearly 1,000 actually, when the final figures are counted. We know that there are a number of people still being held hostage as we speak, Israelis. It's unspeakable what Hamas has done. And the world needs to really wake up to the fact that Hamas are simply a proxy for Iran. This is a part of their strategy, which has always been overt, to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, to undermine the West as much as possible, and to threaten stability in the Middle East and ultimately the world. So the world and international community need to get real about the threat that Israel faces, but it's way, way beyond Israel, what is happening now. And what's heartened me in the hour and a half that I've been looking at the news is that it seems to me the US has responded in a very assertive and clear way, the UK and many other European and indeed some African countries, in saying that total condemnation and absolutely making it clear that Israel has a right to respond to this set of atrocities. Of course, there will be questions to be asked about the lessons to be learned, but those are for another day.
I completely agree with every word Ivan said. Like, my deepest condolences to Arm Israel. I think we are all hurting. Like, when I saw the first video yesterday, I was at work, so I was on my break, and it was an Israeli friend of mine. He posted the video on his Facebook, and I was like, my friend, I think you're like, I thought it was a propaganda, like someone made it up, like not real. And I actually texted him that I think your ID has been hacked. And he said, no, check the news. And when I saw the news, I could not believe it. And my deepest condolences to all the victims, all the family and friends of victims, all the injured, refuah shalema for all the injured. And I just hope like all the hostages come back safe as well. I shudder to think what's going on with what must be going through the families who are seeing like their loved ones being taken hostage like that. I'll put it this way, and I'm taking a bit of time and I'm diverging a bit here. Obviously, I agree with every word Ivan said. Like, Iran uses Hamas as a proxy, and this is what Hamas has done a job for Iran in a sense. The main goal for this, there is other sub-goals, but the main goal for this attack by Hamas was to derail the Saudi-Israel peace deal or diplomatic efforts. Because the idea is once such a attack takes place, a terrorist attack takes place like that, Israel will have to respond. By the way, in the last hour, it has been updated to 700, the death toll, which is horrific. And it is Israel's 9/11 or Israel's 26/11, similar to the Indian hotel attack, terrorist attack that happened. So when Israel responds, obviously Gaza being such a tiny congested area and Hamas using human shields, civilians as human shields, there will be disproportionate or collateral damage and disproportionate death of civilians in Gaza. So I think we were discussing earlier, Bangladesh, I was following Bangladeshi news channels, a bit of Pakistani news channels, what they are showing, even Malaysian news channels. All of those news channels are not even mentioning that, Hamas is retaliating to Israel's strikes. And because of Hamas's retaliation, there are dead bodies in streets of Israel, and people are celebrating. So in those countries that, oh, Israel, like Israelis are dying. And this, we live in a shocking world, unfortunately. And what happens is, when such a news article is portrayed that Muslims are being killed, it puts pressure on Saudis, who are the custodians of the two holiest places of the Muslim world, not to do a deal with Israel. The whole goal is to derail that deal, or the main goal. Yes, there are other goals. Hamas probably wants more money and everything. The way I see it, I totally agree. It is an intelligence failure. It is a military failure. 12 hours, terrorists were roaming through the streets of Israel. How did this happen? Those questions can be asked later. Those inquiries and investigations can happen later. Right now, the main thing is clearing Israeli streets of terrorists and getting our hostages back, and then wiping Hamas off the face of the earth. Because if Hamas stays for after the situation is neutralized, if Hamas is allowed to stay in any sort of power position, that seriously diminishes Israel's credibility, and seriously harms Israel's credibility to everywhere, the West and everywhere. And this is just my opinion. And I don't know. I still cannot believe. I'm still in disbelief to see terrorists driving in a Toyota pickup in Israeli streets. That's you see that in Iraq, you see that in Syria. You don't see that in Israel. As I was telling you earlier, one of my very good friend's brother was in the music festival near the border, and he's still missing. And I have been texting people yesterday, today, my friends in Israel, oh, are you okay? Are you safe? Are you okay? And it's just, I still, my mother called me and how did this happen? She loves Israel a lot. She hears about Israel from me, and she loves Israel a lot. And she's like, how did this happen? Where, for her, it came as where was the intelligence? How did it happen?
Yeah.
And I know we shouldn't ask those questions at this point. The one thing is, I agree with Ivan, the way US is sending military aid to Israel right now, as we speak. In the last hour, they're sending fast forwarding military aids.
How much are they giving?
It's not. It's weapons. It's more weapons aid rather than money. The response by UK, both parties, amazing. France, even Ukraine. And yeah, it has been a very good response. Even the response by Saudis has been amazing. They condemned both sides because they have to, but they said we condemn the innocent attack on innocent civilians. They condemned Hamas by name. So that was huge for them to do as well. So yeah, I just hope all the hostages come back safe, and it's a national tragedy. I think you can see I'm at a loss for words just describing my emotions. All I can say is Am Israel Chai, and we will win. And terrorism will never win. And the forces of, the belief and forces of and hope of the Israeli people will overcome.
I agree with much of what Shadman said. I mean, I would say that one of its objectives is clearly to derail the Saudi-Israeli normalization process. The reason for that, of course, is when there is a heightened conflict and there is a choice to be made, the emotions often on the Arab streets are with the Palestinians. So it makes life much more difficult for regimes like the Saudis, which is why it's undoubtedly the case that will be one of the objectives. I personally think the internal division in Israel over the past year, 18 months, has not helped this at all, in the slightest. And I hope that all thinking Israelis of all political persuasions and religious persuasions will reflect on that. I don't want to say too much political tonight. One of the things I will say is I believe there should be a government of national unity formed as soon as possible.
Bibi was trying to arrange that.
They are trying to form it.
Well, I hope that happens, and I hope it happens without delay. But it must happen with parties that are committed, as Shadman said, to really dealing in a tough way now with Hamas. It's no good having parties in that government.
Do you agree with Shadman that Hamas needs
I
to be
agree. I think I'm not a military. I am not sat there weighing up difficult choices about Israeli lives, whether they be Israeli lives in the IDF or Israeli civilians' lives. So we can use words like wiping them off the face of the earth, sat here in Manchester, but in principle, I agree with him. I think that the time has come for the world to recognise that this is a rogue regime, it's a proxy for Iran, it is committed to destroying any sort of peace and stability in the Middle East.
It is a terrorist group.
The challenge, it's a terrorist group, but it's worse than that. It's a terrorist group directed and organised and funded by a state. It's not just a terrorist group. It is undoubtedly directed, its strategy, its planning, its objectives by the Iranian regime. Now, what I believe is the difficulty for Israel is if you clear out the Hamas leadership, which absolutely needs to happen, you then have to manage the territory. And that is always the difficulty for countries that in principle, we've seen it, haven't we, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, we've seen all that. So the challenge is not just I agree with Shadman in principle, they need to be wiped, the Hamas leadership needs to be wiped out, unquestionably. But what comes after it? And this is where I think there has to be a discussion between Israel and the international community. I've said this myself in the past, possibly even NATO, about how you police Gaza, right? So if Israel takes Gaza back, okay, the fact is you still have to police it on a day-to-day basis with a population that will first of all continue to include some terrorists, right, unquestionably, or insurgents, or however you want to describe them. And also, a group of people who will be instinctively, at least initially, maybe not forever, hostile to the state of Israel. So I agree with him. I don't believe now there is any justification, it's very hard to see any justification for Hamas being allowed to continue running Gaza. It's absolutely nearly impossible to see how an Israeli government, after what they've done to Israeli civilians, and the threat that they have posed over the last 48 hours, that an Israeli government can say, well, we've dealt with them, we've given them a fright, we've told them we won't put up with this any longer. That's what's been said time and time again over the last any number of years. But it's not about wiping them out, because you can wipe out most of the leaders, right? And by the way, it's perfectly legitimate to do so. Let's not hear anybody talk about the rule of law and you're not allowed to assassinate these guys. I mean, nonsense, right? It's absolute nonsense. I believe, by the way, within the rule of international law, Israel has every right
Israel at the casus belli
to take out these Hamas leaders. But what happens afterwards? If Israel takes Gaza back, which I think it should and could do, how is Gaza on a day-to-day basis going to be administered and run? Because you're still going to face, as I say, some very, very serious challenges. So obviously, there's a lot of things to talk about in terms of politics, about the future. The lessons to be learned, I really do want to park for another day. Yeah. There are clearly lessons to be learned. There's people, all sorts of people of all political persuasions, saying it's got the eerie echoes of the Yom Kippur War. But it's not for today. Today is to, first of all, say to the people of Israel, we are with them, we are thinking of them, and we are praying for them, and we hope that our leaders outside of Israel will give Israel every support that they need. Secondly, those of us with a voice, with a platform, need to make it very, very clear Iran are not, Hamas are not just any other terrorist organisation. They are controlled by a dangerous rogue state that wants to destabilise the Middle East, but more importantly, as importantly, wants to destabilise the world and has a toxic agenda. And when Shadman talks about people in other countries celebrating in the streets the death of Israelis, let's be frank, they're not celebrating the death of Israelis, they're celebrating the death of Jews. Right? So here we go again. I'm afraid to say we still have this very, very serious global problem of Jew hatred, or the more polite description is anti-Semitism, which is horrendous and it's unspeakable. So there are many, there will be plenty of time to reflect on the lessons, to reflect on the political consequences of what has happened. But what I hope happens now is that Israel are given all the support that they need to take the action, the decisive action which is necessary. I hope that a government of national unity in Israel is formed as soon as possible. And I hope that on this occasion, the international community will not support Israel for 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours. They will support Israel to get the job done. Because this isn't just about Israel. This is about a set of values. It's about a set of liberal, democratic values. And if Iran is allowed to get away with this, let's be clear, Iran, not Hamas, if they're allowed to get away with this, the message it will send, I've said this about, by the way, Russia's behaviour in Ukraine, the message that sends around the world is dangerous for us all. So let us hope the international community's support for Israel is meaningful, it's lasting, and everybody involved in this now understands that we need decisive action. That means at the end of this particular conflict, Hamas are no longer running Gaza.
Yeah, because if Hamas runs Gaza at the end of this conflict, they will do what, like 7th of October will be repeated again. They will do that again. And the other thing is, I totally agree, the lessons can be learned 2-3 years down the line. Even the Yom Kippur War investigation took like 2 years, like in 1973 when it happened. But right now, like only 84, so two things I don't know if you have seen, Ivan. The Iranian president came out and said, oh, we support Hamas and we have been supporting Hamas. So they actually admitted to it. Now, we have to call out Iran, because without Iran, this doesn't happen. I was reading today that...
Maybe you have to do more than call out.
Well, Iran is under sanctions. What, like at the moment, what else can we do? Like, we can't bomb Iran, but we have to call out Iran. The other thing is, countries like Qatar need to be also held accountable. All the Hamas leadership lives in Qatar. All the Hamas leadership lives in Qatar. Like, these things need to, like, they need to expel them, or they need to maybe extradite them to Israel, or do something. Like, this is not on. Like, I know I'm saying this, and I'm very emotional. I think you can see I'm very emotional about it. I'm very passionate about Israel, and I love that country. And it's just, I still am in disbelief. And I just hope, like, I know we are talking about a hostage situation that makes any Israeli military offensive, that makes it very, very complicated. Because the last thing we want is, like, I don't know if you saw, like, today in Sderot, that an Israeli was driving a military-looking jeep, like, I don't know what it's called, but it's a jeep, and the army wanted him to stop. He didn't, and army fired at him, and he now is in hospital. So, like, a lot of these things are happening. The other thing we have to remember here is, I'm glad that the Western countries, and especially the main Western countries, are giving Israel full diplomatic cover, and I agree with Ivan. It's not only, it has to be there till Israel like deals with Hamas properly and decisively. But only 84 countries have shown any support or vocal support for Israel. There are 212 countries in the world. The rest of the 128 countries actually have been calling against or giving like releasing statements against Israel. So it's just, we live in a very weird world. Like in Bangladesh, there were celebratory rallies today. In Pakistan, there were bigger rallies, even bigger. So it's just like, look, today, and I want to use this platform to say to the whole world, Am Israel Kai. Israel is here to stay. To those who dream, I know in the West, we think that we take it for granted that Israel is here, Israel is a democracy. In the East, or when I say East, in the developing world, countries like Bangladesh, people dream that Israel will someday be destroyed. Your dreams will never be fulfilled. Israel is here to stay. Israel will be here to stay. And like, no matter how many terrorist attacks happen, you will never be able to defeat the spirit of the Israeli people. You'll never be able to defeat the spirit of Am Israel. And I just hope people realize that today and tomorrow and every day.
No, I agree with that. Look, I think that what needs to happen is, as Shadman has said, Hamas at the end of this need no longer, it's essential they no longer run Gaza. We then need to focus on Saudi normalization with the state of Israel, as soon as possible, because that is the key, not just to unlock a different relationship with Saudi Arabia, it unlocks an entirely different relationship between the State of Israel and the Muslim world, with the exception of Iran. It will completely isolate Iran. Let's not forget, whatever happens in this particular conflict, Iran will continue to have a nuclear weapon. Yeah. And that will have to be dealt with. And the best way for that to be dealt with ultimately, and maybe even to empower the moderate forces within Iran and much of the civilian population who hate their regime, if they see a rapprochement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, that unlocking a different relationship between Israel and much of the Muslim world, that could well embolden the internal forces within Iran who realise the consequences of Iran continuing to develop nuclear weapon and continuing to act as a rogue state for the Iranian people, because it's the Iranian people who ultimately will suffer when there is a requirement to take the action that will have to be taken to prevent them from developing that nuclear weapon. I would also say this, two other things. It is absolutely essential that religious leaders, especially Muslim leaders, religious actually and political leaders around the world, come out and be counted in absolutely condemning this behaviour by Hamas and Iran. We cannot anymore allow them to get away with either their silence, their acquiescence, or their collusion. I today challenge Muslim, decent, moderate Muslim leaders, religious and lay leaders, to come out and say this behaviour, these murders are entirely unacceptable to them as Muslims, and are not being done in the name of Islam as a religion. I think that is incredibly important. And the final point I would want to make is it's a very important point. At a time of heightened emotion, the ordinary Palestinian people are not the enemy of the Jewish people or the Israeli people. It's their leaders that are the problem. Whether it's the terrorists of Hamas sponsored by Iran, or the corruption which is endemic on the West Bank, it is not the ordinary Palestinian people are either the enemy of the Jewish people or the Israeli people. And it's very, very important on a day like this that we make that point. So these are very, very extremely worrying times. They're very, very challenging times. There's a lot of political analysis that I'll be very happy to engage with on your show, Ellie, and elsewhere over the next few days and weeks. But tonight is a night, as I say, to mainly think about those who have lost their lives and to think about those who are in peril as we speak here tonight. Think about those who have got to make really difficult and tough decisions in Israel, whether it be in the IDF, whether it be the security forces, whether it be the Prime Minister, members of the cabinet, whoever they are. These are very, very tough and difficult and challenging times. It's for another day to talk about responsibility and accountability and lessons to be learned, and it shouldn't have happened. We know all of those things. And people will have very, very strong views, by the way, about all of that. But it's not for today, and it's not even for tomorrow.